One of the many remarkable things about ivy is its two-phase life history. It has a juvenile phase, first of all, which has two stages to it, during the first of which it creeps along the ground, anchoring itself at intervals by means of little bunches of fibrous roots which are produced opposite the leaves. And the leaves at this stage are characteristically 3 or 5 lobed, deeply 3 or 5 lobed, and they have a rather crinkly texture. So it creeps along like this until it encounters a vertical obstacle, such as a wall or the trunk of a tree. When it does so, its instinct to climb kicks in and up it goes, anchoring itself to the stem or the wall by means of these hairs, these clinging hairs which are produced all along the stem. And their job is to anchor the plant to its support. They may look like roots, but in fact they're not roots. And they don't look particularly striking, but in fact they're quite remarkable structures, because once the hairs have winkled their way into the smallest crack or crevice, they produce a remarkable cement, which consists of absolutely minuscule protein particles in a liquid polymer matrix, which hardens at the same time as the hair itself lignifies and contracts, pressing the stem ever more closely against the trunk of the tree or the wall, which is its support. So up it goes, climbing like this until it reaches a spot where there is uninterrupted light, and this could be as little as a metre if it's climbing up a wall, or as high as 30 metres when it's up a tree in a woodland. And when it reaches a spot where there is undiminished light, it undergoes a remarkable transformation. It stops climbing and becomes a bush. It starts to produce freestanding woody stems devoid of those clinging hairs. The leaf shape changes quite dramatically from the deeply divided leaf of the climbing and creeping form to these heart-shaped or cordate leaves, which have a much more waxy texture. And if we could examine the leaf now at the cellular level, we would find that the nucleus of the cells has become larger and has a higher content of DNA. And now, for the first time, it starts to flower. Little groups of inflorescences crown the woody stems, each a globose cluster of about 20 flowers. There's a calyx of 5 diminutive teeth, 5 green petals, 5 stamens alternating with the petals, stiffly erect but with a slight inward curve. The 5 fused carpels form a low dome with a peg-like stigma on top. The surface of this dome oozes droplets of nectar, which collects at the bottom where the petals arise from its base. This is enormously popular with insects, especially because there is such an abundance of it, because it is offered so freely, and because of the time of year. It's now October. Ivy is the last of the common wildflowers in bloom, an abundant source of nectar and pollen at a time of year when both are in short supply. The flowers are visited by all sorts of insects, sometimes in great numbers. Bees and wasps, flies of all sizes and shapes, beetles, moths, even butterflies. If the day is warm, there will be red admirals and painted ladies some years. The flowers have a rather putrefactive smell, which is why they are so attractive to flies in particular. The flowers are protandrous, the bright yellow anthers maturing first, and after they have shed their pollen they fade and fall from the flower. Nectar is secreted more copiously during this female stage of the flower in order to compensate for the reduced conspicuousness. A total of 70 species of insects have been counted on ivy. And apart from these many insects that visit the flowers, the flower buds and berries are the preferred food plant of the holly blue butterfly, and several moths also feed on it. It's important for nesting birds and provides shelter for many of the insects on which some birds and even bats feed. And being evergreen, it provides shelter all through the year. These are the young fruits, but, and this is a very special feature, they remain like this over the winter, only developing further as winter comes to an end, when the berries in their turn are an important source of food for birds at a time of year when there may be little else to eat, especially in a hard winter. Notably, thrushes and blackbirds, redwings and blackcaps and wood pigeons, along with at least a dozen other species. The berries are very nutritious with a high fat content, and they also contain chemicals called saponins, which keep snails and slugs away. Another special feature is that they are never injured by frost, no matter how severe the winter. In classical mythology, ivy was dedicated to the god Bacchus, apparently because it grew so prolifically on the mythical Mount Nysa, where he was brought up by the Oreades, the nymphs of the mountain. And because Bacchus was the one who taught people how to make wine from grapes, he also became associated with drunkenness and revelry, and by association, so did ivy. It should also be mentioned, however, that in addition to this association with drunkenness, Bacchus is also the pagan equivalent of the patron saint of agriculture, of revelry, and of the theatre. Ivy is still used in making cough mixtures, as it has been for centuries, among many other uses. But among the most memorable of the claims made for ivy is that if you drank your wine out of a cup made from ivy wood, you couldn't get drunk. Now, whatever about the ipsedexitist nature of the claim itself, it's difficult to imagine that you could have ivy stems thick enough for wood turning. But look at these. This beech tree is well into its 3rd century. And look at these ivy stems. Several of them here snaking their way up into the canopy, each of them as thick as my arm. And however impressive these are, the great Oliver Rackham, who perhaps knew more about trees and woods than anybody in his generation, he died about 5 years ago. In his magisterial history of the countryside, Oliver Rackham wrote about an island in the middle of a boggy loch in County Offaly, in which extraordinary ancient oak trees grew, twined with ivy stems, ancient ivies, one of them as thick as a fat man. And le cún of day, agus tethe an govid, agus e gulu. Next year we will go to visit these ancient oaks and their ancient ivies.